Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this Wednesday episode are Tim Kalinowski, Nick Martin. Together, the three of us are going to go on a little handicapping adventure through Wednesday's three-game slate. We'll talk a little bit more about the trade deadline. We recorded yesterday's show, and then a couple hours later, Lindy Ruff got fired. So there is that caveat that we record these during the afternoon. So things can change. Keep that in mind. But let's start with the games themselves. We'll start with one between Buffalo and Toronto. In Toronto, Sabres plus 164 at the time of recording. The Leafs just under minus 200, minus 198 they're sitting at. And the total here of 6. Nick, you and I are on different sides here. I still think that the Sabres are a team that you can play at these kind of prices because I think that the way that they've been playing uh, over, I think, a pretty meaningful sample is kind of conducive to backing them here. They've split the expected goals at 5-on-5 over their last 10 games, and it's just nothing's really happening on the ice. Like the Sabres are not generating a ton, they're not giving up a ton, and that's fine when you're a plus 164 underdog. I do think that there's an argument to be made. I'm sure you'll make it about the Leafs just owning the play here at 5-on-5. But we'll see. I think that this is and also a little bit of a tricky schedule spot. They just played the Bruins on Monday, and then they have the Bruins again to look forward to again on Thursday night. So the spot, the fact that the Sabres are doing a decent job of grinding games into coin flips make me lean with Buffalo. I don't think it would be, this is a classic thing we say on these shorter slates. I don't know if it's a game I would be jumping out of my skin to bet on a bigger slate, but I actually find it to be my favorite bet given what else we're dealing with on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I am coming in from the opposite side. For me, I just think the Leafs are not a big enough home favorite considering how they've actually played recently. You look at it since January 1st, they're 18-8-1 with a 56% expected goal share. It's a lot better if you zoom in more. They've won 13 of 17, and they have 58% of the actual goals. So really, they're playing like a complete top team. So I think on home ice, this is a little short. And then Buffalo, they've made like this last gas push, and like you said, they have done a good job of making games really low event. But I don't think that's enough for me to like see how they're priced. Like I actually think this is kind of short. I feel like the Leafs, given what they've shown recently, deserve to be a bigger favorite than this. And yeah, the schedule spot's not ideal with Thursday, but that game also only means something if they even show up and win this one. And the Leafs actually have responded to losses pretty well recently. It feels like every time we have a game like that Boston one, the media goes bananas and we hear all about it. And then the next night, they've actually responded pretty well. So I think the Leafs are just playing too well right now for me to not want to back them at this kind of a price. I think it should be closer to minus 215. And the other thing, like obviously that Bruins game was horrible, but that one period where they went down 3-0 was like their worst period in 2 months. And again, it's one of those things that every time it happens to Toronto, people make it sound like it doesn't happen to every other team. So
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Only them.
yeah. And I mean, of course, it can't happen versus Boston. It is you want to get on them in terms of the spot and the embarrassingness of it, that like they actually could have maybe tracked down the Bruins in the race. I can see that part of it. Like it's like, of course, the Leafs showed a stinker in this spot, but in terms of like this specific game, I think what they've shown means they deserve to be a bigger favorite. So that's my case there. And then yeah, the other thing too that I think is just kind of, especially today when we have a little more time, if I was Toronto, I would literally be hoping not to get home ice. I think they always let down in these big spots. And I mean, I guess no, yeah, they didn't even win the one. They won game 6 on the road in Tampa. And I feel like it's one of those things that crowd sucks. Their history sucks. Everything about it makes it harder, I think, to play at home. You give up one goal and everyone's like, oh my God, they're doing it again. They're going to do it again. We're going to collapse. Like this team's such a joke. And then I think on the road, it's a little different. It's like, all right, let's just go play our game, give it the best shot. On the road in Boston, you're not like being expected to win the game. So if I were a Leafs fan, I absolutely wouldn't care at all to have home ice. I think that's going to be the narrative that we hear from the media down the stretch here if that race stays close. Um, but I actually don't think it matters. I think I would happily give away that one game if I was a Toronto backer.
Yeah, it's funny. On the flip side of that, Boston has had some stinkers on home ice actually in the last couple of years of the playoffs. So it makes you think. My initial reaction was gonna be like, "Oh yeah, Nick, they just need to make the tickets for the lower bowl like $50." But then I was like, "No, it's this weird thing where they let in a goal early or something like that, and it's like." Oh shit, here we go again. Like that entire building has that anxiety that I think kind of just like permeates throughout the rest of the team. So that's definitely an interesting note. I would say, this total's at 6.5, and you might look and say, oh yeah, these are over teams. Like, obviously Toronto can score, but we've been noting for a while now that Buffalo's surprisingly been an under team. And in their last 10, 2 overs, 8 unders, Leafs actually in the same boat. So I don't know if I'm going to go, if that's enough for me to go ahead and bet this under, but especially with Samsonov probably being in the net for Toronto, I just think it's definitely something to note that, this Buffalo team is a little bit confusing, and it's why it's hard for me to pick a side in this game, because I feel like with Buffalo, I'm playing like pin the tail on the donkey. I don't know which night I'm getting good Buffalo. Like if you just look in their past results, they lose to Winnipeg 5-2, and then before that they beat Vegas 7-2. Like I just don't know what version of Buffalo I'm getting, and so made me pretty nervous to bet on them.
And yeah, well, and I mean, Vegas is a really interesting conversation as well. Like I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I don't mind them. I thought they were a very worthy cup favorite last year. I think the people who say that like luck was a factor in that sort of thing is insane. Like that was the best team in hockey. But Vegas missing the playoffs is something I want to see, to be perfectly honest. I feel like it's just like it would be exciting. It would be hilarious. I would love to see the Flames or the Kraken or the Blues or the Wild get that spot, just like on the merit of shaking some up. And they're struggling so bad. Like I was kind of starting to wonder like what we think of some of the Vegas to miss playoffs numbers. That would probably be one I'd like have my eye on in terms of like maybe some of the less popular books if they had some numbers that were really drifting.
Yeah, and I think, as we move this conversation about Buffalo and Toronto and to Vegas, their type of team, we talked a little bit yesterday about not overreacting to trade deadline moves, but if they end up getting, Pavel Buchnevich or Jake Gensel, um, I think that they immediately actually do move the needle. But I don't know how much like those trades make them. Like they would solidify their spot more than take them to the next level, if that makes sense. Like I wouldn't want to be holding a Vegas to miss the playoffs. I just pulled up one sports book. They're plus 450 right now to miss the playoffs. I think that's way too short to bet it. But I wouldn't want to be holding that ticket if they make that trade. But it wouldn't make me excited to go bet them to win the Stanley Cup either. Does seem
I,
like they have some issues.
yeah,
That
oh my bad, they both.
No, I was just gonna say that their issues seem legitimate right now. And we'll see. They're a team that for me would need to snap into some sort of form before we get into the tournament.
Yeah, and it feels like one or two bodies would just, psychologically help them so much. Like it just feels like we need help. We need more NHL bodies and depth. Like they were confusing for me all last year's run, and I think you look at them this year, it's like where's that mojo? Where's that, you know? And I think what has been a lot of the issue is they don't have, for a lot of casuals, they don't have a lot of big names, right? They did it with like kind of an ultimate team effort last year, and this past stretch they've missed their real names, and I think that
Yeah,
that
I
can't
was
be
gonna say I
discounted.
don't really you see that stat thrown out so much about last season and how they didn't have like a 60-point score, but that's why that team was so damn good because they did. They had like Stone and Eichel were as good as any team stars and they just didn't play. So people like I
Mhm.
think kind of miscredit that. And that's why, yeah, I agree. Like this next stretch will be the really interesting one to watch with Vegas. They get the Canucks on Thursday, which we'll obviously go into. Um, and I'm really intrigued to see how they bounce back in that game because now they have enough NHL bodies that for me, if they keep playing like they are, then you really can't. Like now they have Petrangelo back, they have Shea Theodore back, they got Eichel back. I know Stone's still out, but like some of those games they were playing with like 9 NHL regulars out, and now it's like close to what most teams are missing at this point in the year. So it'll be really interesting to see how they bounce back. I could see it being a thing where like I'm depending on where the prices go, saying maybe they're not the worst cup bet, or still trying to say that maybe they could make the playoffs.
Okay. Onto the Leafs. Excuse me. Onto the Wings and Avalanche. Detroit plus 160 in the Rocky Mountains. Colorado minus 192. A total here 6.5. Dylan Larkin will be sitting. I think the Avalanche are another team that actually has the potential to take a leap into from like a sure they have a chance to win the Stanley Cup to solidifying themselves as a actual one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the league with one move, but I just don't know if that move's out there. They would need to address that their depth down the middle, and I don't know if they'll be able to wrangle in the kind of player they need. I think Casey Middlestat would fit in nicely there, or a player of his ilk down the middle. But for this game in particular, and thoughts on what we could see out of either one of them, if you want to go into that, Nick. I've got nothing. I would be leaning towards the over, if anything, as I still think that there's room to bet against the Detroit goaltending. But I'll pass here and let you take over.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think Colorado, to me, has probably the highest percentage chance of like greatly improving their chances at the deadline, just because the deadline rentals that they're getting, to me, upgrade their roster more than a lot of other teams, right? Like we talked about it with Boston, where I'm like, who does one of their set like Coyle, Zaka, Coyle, Zaka is a like relatively weak center ice, but I don't think any of the rentals improve that much. But in Colorado, I think some of the rentals actually are a lot better than like guys they have playing minutes. So that's why it probably makes much more of a difference for them. And I agree on this game. I kind of lean towards the over. Um, these teams played a 2-1 game that easily could have broken out in Detroit. And I think there's a couple of reasons why I still like it. First off, Larkin, I think his impact like towards the total, if anything, like having him out, I don't mind it. I think he's obviously pretty good in his own end. And then Detroit has so many competent scorers. Like that's kind of been the story all season about why they've outscored expectations and the analytics. And then yeah, the other one I'm going to go into is I like Robbie Fabry to score on that top power play unit. We'll see what he's out there at. He's been around plus 450, and if that's not moved, I would do that. Or Joe Veleno. He's got some legit offensive upside. He's scored some nice goals this year, and he is going to get the top line role. So I think either of those guys in what I could see being a high scoring matchup, especially on like a small slate, if you want some fun goal scorer sprinkles, I think are good options.
Yeah, I like and bet the over. I think both these teams, you said it, Nick, capable of scoring, but also let up their fair share of chances. I always I've probably mentioned it a dozen times, but can't get out of my head that Detroit, even during that run, was getting outshot by something like 100 cumulative shots or so over a couple of weeks. So that's definitely what lands me on the over here. And a note about Colorado, what you said, Nick, and you see their ceiling be the highest for trades working out. I think too, as part of it, a lot of teams make moves just to make a move and then they find out the fit later. I think Colorado has such an obvious hole or holes that the fit is very obvious, instead of you look at, for instance, like what Vancouver has done and trying to shuffle in and make this Monahan thing work or whatever. It's like I think Colorado could certainly benefit. Did they get Monahan or Lindholm? Which one was it?
Van got Lindholm.
Lindholm. Yeah.
Which, yeah, that's not working out. Yeah, I was gonna say you're gonna get called out if you say Monahan's not working because the
No, I
Jets
know.
love him. He's scoring like every night.
They're like identical to me. I get them.
I can see, yeah. Yeah, and the one thing too with the Avs, like they're gonna get Nichushkin back here if he hits his top form, and then there's loose speculation they might get Landeskog back for the playoffs. Who knows what he'll have in the tank, but that would be 2 serious top 6 reinforcements if they both are in top form.
Okay, one more game to get to, but before we do that, and boy, it's a doozy with the Senators and Ducks. Just a quick heads up that North Carolina is launching sports betting this Monday, March the 11th. So if you're in the Tar Heel state, take advantage of the best sign-up offers across every sports book by just following the link in this episode description. All the North Carolina offers in one place. Just check out the link in the description. Okay, Senators and Ducks. boy. All right. Senators are minus 155 favorite on the road. The Ducks plus 130, and this is a total of 6.5. Brady Tkachuk's status is unclear, I believe, at the moment for this one. And I think that this is a game where you're asking yourself this question. Do I feel minus 155 enough confident that the Senators are going to give a hoot about the result of this game? And I think that the answer to that question is impossible to have like a strong feeling for. So I'm going to pass. I do think if the Ducks get, if the Sens take a bunch of money, whether Kachuk is in the lineup or not, whatever happens, I would be interested in Anaheim, but this is not how I want to end a Wednesday evening. So I'm going to pass here, unless the unlikely scenario happens where the Ducks move like 15 cents. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I actually am going to say with a decent degree of confidence, pending like maybe more Sens absences, because it wouldn't be surprising to see Chikrin sat out for asset protection reasons. Maybe Adam Henrique's in the same boat too, although I think he moves the needle a little less. So I actually think this line is going to move towards the Sens being a bigger favorite than the current minus 142. I feel like that's like numerically speaking, I think that looks a little short given like the way that the Sens will actually probably control the game. But again, I'm with you. I don't really think I want to bet it. I can see the logic to where this is going to move. But I actually like the over. I feel like it's one of these games that it just first off the Sens games like they're always such a high event affair, and I feel like I continue to think there's been more low scoring ones than expected recently. I think games like we saw Friday versus Arizona are more likely to be kind of the rule than not. And then Saturday, tough one to stay under. They missed a ton of chances themselves. I still think this is just like get set up for a good spot. Two teams that don't care anymore, that are out of it. High offensive upside for both. Ducks can't defend. Sens goaltending is horrific. So I just feel like there's a lot of avenues for this one to break open. And then the other one, I'll probably keep my eye on. I played Drake Batherson's props on Saturday, and if the numbers hold up where they were, or even close to even money for 3 shots with Kachuk out of the lineup, I would do that because he just gets that extra usage and slides onto the power play for more minutes. So I think that'll be one to watch. But yeah, I mean, what a ridiculous game. And there's so many moving parts too. Like it's, there's just like so many questionable sends and guys might be sitting for the trade deadline, might not be like, I don't know.
Yeah, I remember not too long ago these teams played in Ottawa, and I think we were on the over, and it was 5-1 Anaheim.
Yep.
And it was like exactly how I feel about Ottawa, in that they are an over team, but they should be an even larger over team, because so many of these I feel like it's like lose 4-1, win 4-1. It's like that should be a recipe for an over game. Nashville comes to mind when they can't generate a shot on net in the third period. Like, just get the hell out of here. So yeah, I'm gonna bet the over again here. I also just think, Leboff, to your point of who gives an F, who wins this game. Well, if that's the case, then who gives an F about back checking on a 2-on-1? I think there's, no matter who sits, who plays, I don't really know if that affects the number too much. Like, talk about these guys that could, a Chikrin, Kachuk, like, I don't think it's like, yeah, glaringly helps the under. It's, those are talented guys, and they also let up a ton. So I'm on the over here. I get why, like, just our gut in terms of, we think Ottawa, like, everyone thinks Ottawa is better than they've been playing, or better than their results, especially because of the goaltender, that this number is like indicative of that. But it's just so silly to think that you want to lay at any point with Ottawa, knowing the pain you could feel, knowing late at night on this, Western, at Wednesday at 12:30, you could be sitting watching this game going, why the hell am I waiting on an Ottawa Senators win?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to look at, I wouldn't be surprised if this game ended up being kind of comparable to the Ducks. They had an absurd 7-4 game versus Columbus, and then a 6-4 game versus the Sharks at the end of February. And I sat through that entire thing, and it was like men's league, and I loved it. So hopefully, like, this could get that kind of a vibe. I could definitely see it just breaking open and just being a very like two teams finishing up the schedule kind of matchup. Feels like the Sens are all the way done from their like little surge to like, we could go 20-0 and make the playoffs. And now it's just like, okay, who's leaving? Where are we going to draft? Hopefully, I mean, their fans are happy to see them losing again at this point.
Okay. A quick little roundup, I guess, as we look ahead to the trade deadline. We'll try to keep it, as betting focused as we can. And there are a couple teams I'm just gonna rattle off here. I do think the Flyers discourse is a little exhausting at this point. I think the most likely scenario with Philadelphia is they just don't do anything. They kind of just stay the course and don't move Nick Seeler and Scott Lawton and Sean Walker. I do think that one team that is kind of interesting, and this is going to come back to a bet on, I guess it would come down to, a make the playoffs would be the most logical correlation, but Noah Hannafin, he wants it. The rumor is that he is trying to finagle a move to Tampa Bay. The other option is Florida, but the dark horse that's being mentioned in bidding for his services is Washington. And the Capitals, Nick has been down on them despite them hanging around the playoff race all season. I think that we'd all kind of be in agreement. They're 7-1 to make the playoffs. And the reason that I actually think the trade makes the reason I still think they're a viable option in this playoff race more than anything is that the teams around them, like Pittsburgh, seems like they're totally content with being cooked and trading Gensel, etc. away. The Devils are still a mess despite the coaching change. We've talked ad nauseum about the Islanders' helter-skelter nature. The Flyers have a brutal schedule coming up over the next 3 weeks. The Red Wings are now without Dylan Larkin, and we talked about how their run was a little smoke and mirrors. So you can do a couple things here. If you want to go play them at 7-1 or whatever the best number is on Washington to make the playoffs, I don't think a Hannafin trade will like make bookmakers rush to adjust it, but the Spencer Carberry angle is still out there, especially with Vancouver starting to hit the skids a bit. Nick, am I going a little bit too far here?
I still think it's a little short on the Caps, honestly. It's pretty tough. Like most models have them longer than that. I see the line of thinking, and I'd be curious to see like how the number drifts here, because I don't mind it. Yeah, it's just tough. I'm so low on the Caps, but like I kind of like your thinking with Detroit with Larkin out, and Tampa I really don't think has been playing
Tampa, I didn't even
very
mention
competitive.
Like there's spots available. It doesn't look like there are spots available when you look at the standings, but I still think that those spots are all up for grabs. Like even if, let's say, the Islanders continue this run and grab one, like still could be a couple other spots left. So
Oh yeah, there's room. Like the one thing too. So Tampa, I think they'll probably beat the Flames on Thursday. I could definitely see me saying we should bet them, even despite the fact I don't think they're good. I think Calgary's about to fall out. They're getting smoked the last two, and but then they play Philly on Saturday, and then they have a week off, and then they play the Rangers in Florida. And like if they lose 3 out of those 4 games, which I think is realistic, then everyone's going to have caught up to them by the time they play those games in hand. And then I think people will really kind of be on this narrative that spot is open too, and that the Philly one's still competitive. So I do think the East could be a bit of a race. So I don't mind it. I'd like to think the Caps could maybe do it, but I'm not sure.
Well, the good news is as we record, Washington has 3 games in hand on Philly, and they're 7 points back of them. I guess, I mean, I'm totally interested in, 7-1s and, stuff like this. I guess the way that I think about it is it's a parlay of Philly drops out and or Detroit/Tampa Bay. Washington then acquires Hannafin, because I don't know if they can get this without Hannafin. Then, they win enough on top of that. And then finally, if you're going for the Carberry angle, that changes the sentiment enough to make him like have an actual shot in the voting. So I think all of that doesn't really add up to the numbers that we want to bet here.
Yep.
And I'll add on top of that, Washington is a -33 goal differential.
They're amazing. It's an amazing thing to watch.
old fashioned goal differential, -33. Philly's +4, like Detroit's +21. The Islanders are -21. Like it just sticks out like a sore thumb and feels like an awful lot has to go right. Maybe beyond the legs of this parlay I outlined.
Yeah, and sometimes I have followers like reach out to me with like weird outlier numbers, especially on like make playoffs and stuff like this. Like they have, whatever. The one that I would keep my eye on those, I think if you can get Tampa like +500 to make playoffs, or sorry, I should say +400 would be the target I would want.
To miss.
Then to
To
miss.
miss,
Yes,
to
my
miss.
bad. Thank you. FanDuel's at +310, which I wouldn't quite do, but I think if you can get +400, it's a pretty good play. I think the wheels could kind of just fall off here. What I would probably do, especially like we won't take the time to go on this on Thursday, is wait until after the Flames game and try to hear what they do at the deadline and then see where the number goes. Because I don't think that'll be the kind of thing that gets adjusted. But if they don't do a lot, I think they'll probably win that Flames game, but then they'll be set to go into this stretch. And then I think it could be a good time to fade them.
All right. And another team, like we talked a little bit about the Avalanche. I do want to talk about the Western Conference. I know it sounds like buying high right now on these Nashville Predators and the run that they're going on. I do think that there's going to be some chatter about their conference outrights and Stanley Cup futures, etc. Like Nashville to me is a team that actually seems to um closer to being like an act like the Kraken were last year, to being like a tough out, and they would need a bunch of things to break their way, but they're sitting at 80-1 to win the Stanley Cup. If they like shore up the bottom of their lineup with a couple of bodies, I actually think that this team has some upside, especially with how this playoff race could break for them. Like if they were to play Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs, or Winnipeg in the first round of the playoffs, I don't really think that the Predators are without a reasonable chance to do it. I'd much rather them, and the second round is going to be a tough matchup no matter what bracket they end up in. But I do think that the Predators number is worth monitoring, because I just don't think it's going to hang around much longer. And they're a team that they wouldn't have to do much to this roster to take another step forward in this really surprising season right now, Nick.
Yeah, I love the Preds right now. I don't think they will. Okay, they're not going to buy, right? But they just signed Novak, so
Right.
that's
And I don't
huge.
think they're going to trade Carrier anymore. Like I think that
I
would,
don't think you can. I don't think
yeah.
it's unless you get like an offer that blows you away. I don't think it's fair when you have a team on like an 8-game win streak rolling like you are, and they're not not set up too badly for the future. So I know like some fans take is always like you should just always try to fully tear it down or fully build it up so that you can compete. But I don't really know about that. Like I think it's like you win 8 in a row, you're this good. You got to let this group like at least play it out together. And I agree. Like I think there's worse bets. Like I do fully believe like first round series. I don't think they'd get smoked by the Canucks or the Jets. I think those will all be like close, gritty, grindy kind of games. Like I completely agree. I wouldn't be shocked to see like them kind of do what the Kraken did to the Avs last year. And then yeah, the one point that we continue to like throw out there with the Preds is this is their record with like league average goaltending. They're actually below league average over the whole season in a lot of
Right.
categories. So that is like a pretty scary note. And it has trended up lately, which isn't surprising when you've won 8 in a row, but it is like a pretty huge feather in their cap if you're going to say, okay, well, if you get in the playoffs and Saros steals you some wins, then that's
Yep.
pretty threatening for sure.
I look at it this way. A lot of times we say, hey, don't rush to bet this team because this number will probably be there before game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. This number is going to get obliterated if the Predators make the playoffs, I would think. I would think that this is coming down maybe to like 40-1. Tim, anything else before we say au revoir until Thursday?
Well, the Nashville thing, I mean, you're right. My initial inclination is like, oh, don't buy when they're on a heater here. But we did like Nashville, relatively at points in this season. We talked about them. And I guess I'm sitting here like, I just wish I had a little more conviction on like how much we like Nashville. Once they kind of went through that skid, it was like, oh, maybe they're finally running out of gas here. They're just ready to be sellers. Also, too, for what it's worth, Jeff, it's an important market to get into the playoffs. That's what they say. Nashville does well in the playoffs in terms of the gate, and I will tell you, I will bet if Nashville's in, I would bet them against whoever they play in a series price, because I totally think that pound for pound they can at least make it a series. For what it's worth, they're 1-1 against Winnipeg, 2-2 against Dallas, 2-0 against Colorado. So, for what it's worth.
This would actually be, I think, a good one for people to reach out. I'd like to hear who you think is the most likely wild card team on either bracket to win a series. I think it's definitely both West teams. Not that I think the West is that weak, but I actually think the Kings and Preds are a lot more legit than the Wings and the Lightning, which I think is probably contrary to a lot of people's beliefs. But I think they have less black and white flaws, both teams, comparatively than those other ones. So yeah, I don't know. And this is why the playoffs are so good, because like two of these series are probably going to end up being super competitive and someone's probably getting upset. So yeah.
All right, there you go. 3 games and some more trade deadline and futures fodder for you for your Wednesday afternoon and evening. We'll be back on Thursday morning to look ahead to a 12-game slate. Tim Kalinowski is a game time decision for that one because his high school hockey team that he coaches, he doesn't play for them. Otherwise, he wouldn't be allowed on a gambling podcast, except in Kentucky, because you can only have to be 18 in Kentucky to gamble. Has a quarterfinal matchup in Massachusetts. So good luck to Marblehead High School and in their pursuit of some silverware. But at the very least, you'll hear from me and Nick on Thursday morning. And then don't forget, we'll be back for another Power Plays video for Bet365 over the weekend. Thank you for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to those who have. Thank you to our producer, Noah. And good luck with all your bets on Wednesday.